Hello, reality sandwich community. Kyle here, one of your favorite conscious agents, back with another exciting Share Your Experience interview. Joined today by the wonderfully talented cannabis cultivator, Tom Scoble. Tom, thanks for joining me today.
Hey Kyle, happy to be here.
Awesome. You run an amazing farm and brand called Mother Magnolia, but could you give a brief introduction to our audience for those who aren't familiar with your work?
Absolutely, yeah. We launched the farm back in 2015. I think we were fully licensed in 2016. We're here in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. Beautiful spot here, 32-acre farm. And again, we started under the medical program here in Oregon. We were one of the first licenses issued when Measure 91 had passed, and so that summer they were issuing rec licenses. We jumped on that. And it's just been a slow and steady process for us to evolve all of our different SOPs. We decided to bootstrap the entire operation ourselves here and not take on outside investors so that we could do it slow and steady. We've got, just an amazing team. We're almost 25 people deep now on the farm. My core garden crew leads have been cultivating cannabis, probably for collectively, a couple of decades. So we've got a good brain trust here. We've been passionate about the soil science. So we're all soil. Of course, very focused on the biology and the microbial life in the soil. We've sort of been geeking out on that forever. LED has been the foundation for us for our indoor cultivation. We do indoor, light depth greenhouse, and full term outdoor. So that's the scope of our cultivation. And when we decided to launch the indoor, we were fortunate to be introduced to Fluence Bioengineering early on when we were starting to outfit our facility. And one of the founders of Fluence, Jerry, came out to the farm, showed us the lights, and LED was just still early days, but Fluence had cracked the code and gotten some RPMs under the hood that were very impressive. And we launched with that, and I feel like that's been a big market advantage for us. We've been passionate about all of our um, cultivars that we've been pheno hunting here. It's a big part of what we do. I was just telling you before the call that we just finished up a pheno hunt where we just found a few more golden tickets. It's just probably the most exciting and fun part of the cultivation for us at this point. Production cycles are production cycles, but pheno hunting is it's such a long process. It really takes about a year to get something into production out of the pheno hunt. From popping the seeds to culling the males to then finding the different phenos to then validating those. And it's been a great long process for us of tweaking and experimenting and having a good time with it. We just enjoy it so much, and it's been a fun process.
Very amazing. A lot to unpack there. My mind is racing with questions here. First, I'd like to jump in. Were you born and raised in Oregon? Oregon's really on the forefront of cannabis cultivation, nice terroirs there, but also Oregon's opened up, the whole psychedelic mushroom scene there. They were the first to kind of quote legalize and open a lot of the centers there. What do you think about the culture or area of Oregon has lent itself so well to plant medicine and people wanting to grow and kind of let the culture open up there?
Sure, great question. So my wife was born in Oregon. Her family's from Oregon, and I was not born here in Oregon. I was actually born in Texas. Spent most of my life in California, Yosemite National Park, actually of all places. My dad was the manager at the Ansel Adams Gallery, so I grew up in Yosemite.
Wow.
So early formative years, actually living in Yosemite was amazing, and then Santa Barbara, California. And then I went to school in LA. I went down to go to school at UCLA and I got kind of stuck in LA with the golden handcuffs, working with plants through the lens of landscape construction. But then when the opportunity to move up here to the family farm in 2015 presented itself, it was time. We had two kids that were young. We wanted to raise them in Oregon. And so we made the transition here to reunite with my wife's family and reconnect here. It's been just absolutely like I don't miss LA at all. I miss people and I miss the food, but I certainly don't miss the too many rats in a cage in LA. Oregon is
Mhm.
just exquisitely beautiful. Could not be more thrilled to be in this state. And as you said, the culture of Oregon is just so unique. There are so many talented growers here, and part of what I think that we have felt at our cultivation, and what I think a lot of growers here in Oregon feels, is that the focus on craft cannabis and quality is it's almost just the starting point of the conversation. Like unless you're looking at your cultivation practice through the lens of, you've got, Tiger Woods and Phil Mickelson on your right and left in terms of their caliber and their talent, you have to be operating at such a high level and so focused on so many of the details and nuances of really elevated cultivation. It's not to say that, cultivating using hydroponics or cocoa is not possible. Of course it is, and a lot of people are producing really great cannabis with that. But Oregon is very, very tied to the soil and sort of this notion of like terroir. Like I don't even, I think that there you have a ton of outdoor cultivators here who are cultivating at scale, strictly doing outdoor, and that's mostly happening, of course, in southern Oregon. And the soil down there in the Applegate Valley is just so pure. That is some of the most beautiful country in the world, and the soil down there is just absolutely gorgeous. And I think that, whether it's, the being on the forefront of the psychedelic movement, and mushrooms as a psychedelic mushrooms as a therapeutic tool, Oregon just thinks differently, and Oregon operates differently. I think that, um, we've been really inspired by the community and the culture here, and I think our game has been elevated immensely by that. There's just some really, really talented growers who have devoted their entire lives to trying to steer this plant in the most optimal way, and so we're just trying to carry the torch and be a spark in that flame, and uphold the standard that Oregon has set for quality craft cannabis.
You mentioned a background in landscape design and construction, but when did you first grow your first cannabis plant, and now, what launched you into this journey? You're running a 30, plus acre farm now.
Yeah. So when I was at UCLA, a buddy of mine smuggled some seeds back from Amsterdam, Super Skunk One. And my really close friend back in that day, who lived across the street from me, his dad was the founder of Hydro Farm. So you may
Mm.
remember Hydro Farm was sort of the go to place for getting your indoor gear for cultivation back in the day. So he called his dad, and he sent us down a couple of hydroponic kits. And in our 2 bedroom apartment, we had, in one bedroom closet, we had the veg cycle going, and in the other, we had the flower cycle. And we ran that Super Skunk One for a couple of years there, and watching that cultivation process and being able to grow our own while we were at college. I mean, again, put that in a college brain where you're just like, oh my god, it was just so magical, and we had a blast doing that. So that was, I guess, my first real, indoor cultivation. So that was back in 1990. My god, I'm so old. Jesus. Um, and I just kind of got the bug. My when I grew up as a kid, my parents always had big vegetable gardens, and it was a big focus on just growing. And I always loved growing things. I've always been, we all sort of are born with different chips in our brains. Some people are really good at math, some people are really good at language, some people are good at art. We all have these different intuitive things that we kind of come into this world kind of wired for. And I think I was just wired with plants. I feel them on an intuitive level, I connect with them on an intuitive level. Steering cultivation and sort of walking into a room and reading the room and being able to pick up on the needs. It's always just been something that feels very natural for me. So yeah, the early excitement of cultivation started, college days, and being able to do it at scale here has just taken all of that sort of geeked out, sort of like giddy kid energy around like growing cool things like amazing flowers, and just put it on steroids. And it's just it really, the luster of it hasn't, been lost. I think that the challenges of, you know, the ups and downs of the ecosystem, or challenges at market or pricing, or some of the pressures that we're just dealing with in the early stages of the evolution of cannabis here on a economic level, on a large scale level, is just going to be part of any new industry that's trying to find its way through the early stages. But from a pure cultivation perspective, it's just something that I continue to just, I love it. We're clearing out a room to, like, yesterday we harvested a couple of rooms, so we're clearing out the rooms today and getting ready to reset a room. And I never get tired of that reset where you load in a fresh set of plants and you get to watch that movie again. And it's theoretically it's the same movie, but every time it's slightly different. So you never know, like, what's going on in the scene and what's happening. It's just it's endlessly fascinating and challenging, and so yeah, I love it.
You mentioned the term pheno hunting earlier. Could you explain to the audience what exactly that is and what makes different phenotypes, cannabis seeds, and plants unique in today's ecosystem? I see a lot of
For
kind
sure.
of Instagram videos out there. People are like, oh, the sour diesel of today is not the same as it was in '09.
Mm,
Could you talk about why somebody
absolutely.
might be telling that story out there?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, great question. So phenohunting is short for phenotype. So there's phenos and phenotypes and chemotypes. These are different expressions of the genetic, and the easiest way to explain it is mom and dad, just two people get together and they have kids. Let's say they have four kids, two boys, two girls. Are they going to be, unless they're identical twins, they're all going to be slightly different. They're going to have different genetic expressions of mom and dad. And so nothing different there in breeding cannabis. When you take a male plant and you pollinate a female plant, or you create those seeds, there's I don't want to go into too much of the detail. There's different ways of actually creating seeds. Essentially, if you have regular seeds, right, where they could express a male or a female genetic, you are then in a situation where you're trying to figure out which phenotype or which expression of that genetic is the ideal expression that you're chasing. And when we look at the phenohunting, we're just trying to find the ultimate expression of that genetic. So, looking for yields, plant structure, terpene profiles, potency, morphology. How easy is it to work with that plant? There's tons of factors that we consider when we're thinking about selecting a particular pheno from a pheno hunt. And on average, we're going to pop 20 to 40 seeds. So nothing crazy. There, believe me, there are people that are doing pheno hunts on a scale that it breaks my brain when they're doing thousands of one particular genetic, trying to find the golden ticket or the needle in the haystack. We don't go that big. The pheno hunt that we're just launching right now, for example, is going to be about 250 units across multiple different genetics. So within each given genetic, we're looking for an ideal pheno that we can then choose based on all the different qualities that I had just articulated. And we then, once we find that pheno that we're particularly excited about, we then take that and we put it into production. We'll just do one table of that pheno to validate, just to make sure that our intuition about it and the yields and everything translates, and then we ultimately will either choose to fold that into our production lineup or not. But it's a long process, and it's one that again is really exciting, that the team really enjoys, because of course it's sort of like scratching that lotto ticket. You don't know if you're going to get something really magical and you're going to win that $1,000 prize, or it's just going to be a dud. So pheno hunting is something that is really pretty magical, and we have a good time with it.
Beautifully put. Could you talk about the differences between indoor versus outdoor sun grown cannabis and why some people prefer one or the other?
Yeah, great question. So I'll use an example to sort of illustrate the point. So for quite a long time, we ran a White Tahoe cookies that was out of Archive. They had called it Sweeties, and we realized that again it's the White Tahoe cookies that made it so compelling, and sort of became known out in the marketplace under that moniker. So we ran the White Tahoe cookies for a number of years indoors, and when we started our greenhouse and outdoor cultivation, and it's not just unique to this White Tahoe example. We've done this with multiple cultivars, where after a while, whether it's because they are no longer performing indoors, or we're struggling with that genetic indoors, or other cultivars come along and we want to replace them, we'll go ahead and give them a shot out in the sun and see if ultimately putting them out in the sun is going to unlock something different. Now, why would putting something out in the sunshine versus an indoor environment unlock something different? Well, at the risk of stating the obvious, we just can't replicate the sun. And as good a technology as Fluence Bioengineering or any of these other companies have been able to replicate the light spectrum of the sun, and just the overall ancient history of these plants evolving out under that spectrum, et cetera, et cetera, you're just not able to unlock that genetic expression in exactly the same way. People talk about biomimicry as a way to mimic outdoor and seasonal changes that are happening to plants to try to replicate or mimic outdoor expression. Um, And there's just only so much you can do. And when we put plants out in the sunshine, we find that things are unlocked and expressions are achieved that simply can't be achieved indoors. Our White Tahoe cookies was a great example of that. And she's now found a home outside, and she does just beautifully out in the greenhouses, and it's one of our favorite greenhouse cultivars. Mostly it's just the way that I would probably sum it up in essence is it's really the terpene expression that gets more diverse and more intense. And so a lot of times that sun grown flower, and I think for people who do prefer to grow, so, excuse me, who prefer to smoke outdoor flower, they're chasing a flavor profile that's more intense in that outdoor sun grown flower.
Beautifully put. I recently attended an event up in New York City where they really brought the wine tasting experience to cannabis. We, wanted to smell the terps and vape the flower to really get the taste there. Could you talk about why cannabis is being elevated to this category of a product like wine, and how you really taste the flower and can appreciate the notes in there? And what are the different smell notes that you want to look for or can sense?
Yeah, good question. So terpenes are the volatile, sort of aromatic compounds that are endemic to cannabis. So people talk about the terps or terpenes of the cannabis flower. That's where the flavor is. That's where the aroma is. That's where the smells are. So terpene diversity, and our sweeties, the White Tahoe cookies, won an award at the Cultivation Classic back in 2018 for none other than terpene diversity. Just a total unicorn. So every time we test a flower, of course, we have to test for pesticides and potency, and that goes on the report and that goes on the label on the jar in the stores. But what we also test for every single time is terpenes, and there are 42 terpenes that our lab tests for. I wish I had a lab report right in front of me. I could just kind of hold it up to the camera, but it's a really exciting thing that we always are interested in when we do get the lab reports back, because we're always interested in the total percentage of terpenes and the diversity of terpenes. So you have pretty traditional cannabis terpene profiles. You have some dominant terpenes. Three of the most dominant terpenes would be myrcene, beta caryophyllene, and terpinolene. Those would be sort of three big buckets that I would put a lot of cannabis in. The myrcene is that sweeter. They liken it to sort of that sweet mango, a sweeter terpene profile. Beta caryophyllene is typically found as the dominant terpene in gassier strains, and then the terpinolene is that super bright, citrusy, limey smell that you get. Within those dominant terpenes, which there's usually a dominant terpene in a cannabis strain, you'll then see multiple secondary terpenes present. And so a lot of what you're referencing there in terms of the overall end user experience, bringing the whole energy of viticulture into it, and understanding all the different notes and flavor profiles that cannabis can bring. The deeper that you go into cannabis, the deeper that you understand all of the complexities of those flavor notes and the way that they play well together. And again, just to keep pulling on the White Tahoe strain, there's a terpene that's present in our White Tahoe that's known as nerolidol. And nerolidol is a terpene that is found in ginger. And so if you think of that sort of spicy ginger terpene profile, when we first smelled that White Tahoe cookies, there was an aroma to it that nobody could put their finger on. And it was just so compelling and so interesting and so different. And then when we got the terpene profile back, it was really heavily dominant in nerolidol. We went down the rabbit hole, found that connection to ginger, and it was like, bang, that's it. That's what makes that particular strain pop as something that is just different and compelling and unusual. And when you close your eyes and you smell it, it's just like, wow, I can't quite put my finger on that. And there's so many examples of that in cannabis, where the complexity and the way all those terpenes play together, you can sometimes get something that gets very muddy and unfocused and suboptimal. And other times it's laser like sharp in terms of exactly what that terpene is that's shining through. And then other times you have this really a wild terpene diversity that then creates this incredibly complex picture that is unlike anything that you smelled before. And that's sort of the home run, where you just have something that is wildly unusual and eclectic.
This may be a loaded question for you, but states like California and New Jersey and New York, there's a real disconnect between somebody walking into a dispensary and There's all these packaged products on the shelves where in places like Colorado, people walk into a dispensary, they still have flower in a jar. You could smell, pick out the nugs you want. What's your opinion on the disconnect now between the packaged cannabis goods and the end user experience, and why somebody should be researching where the cannabis comes from and maybe even start growing at home themselves?
Good question. I think that every market is different, and in fairness, I don't have a lot of visibility into other markets. I can speak to the Oregon market where it's mostly deli style here. To your point a moment ago of jars on the shelf, bud tenders take those jars down. Customers can look at the flower, they can smell the flower. Um, it's a little bit more of a I don't know, intimate experience where you get a more up
Produce.
close and person. Yeah, exactly. Just like produce, right? So, um, I think that our largest customer here in the Oregon market is one of the only brands that will actually do pre-packed flour. Customers still can be handed a small pre-packed jar of flour and take a look at it and smell it. It's not quite the same as having the larger jar of a deli style, but it's just rare that we do pre-packed in this market. I remember when I was in Boston, shout out Boston, a couple of summers ago, and I went into a dispensary and I had no access to the cannabis. It was all behind some wall, and you just kind of look at these displays where the flower is sitting under some little display jeweler's loop type situation where I can see the flower, and then I point to it. I'm like, okay, can I get that? And that's my experience as a customer. Now maybe that's changed, but that just felt so suboptimal in terms of really getting to actually check out that flower. I think it's just so important that customers get to understand, what it is that they're buying. In terms of cultivating your own, look, if you've ever grown a tomato at home, picked it right off the vine and popped it in your mouth, it's just different. And when you put your own energy and your own time into cultivating something, you which no cultivation happens quickly. So it's really investing that time, developing a relationship with that plant, spending the time with it. And now with cannabis, then on the back end, you're drying it, you're trimming it, you're curing it. And finally, the day comes when you can smoke it. That's 70, 80, 90, 100 days of time that you've invested into that experience. And aside from the really cool experience of simply cultivating, you then have that moment on the back end of being able to enjoy that. You know exactly what inputs you put into that. You know that you haven't put any sprays on it, or if you have had to spray your plant, you've made conscious decisions about some organic sprays. You just have a different relationship with that end product. And I think that long term, that's ultimately what we all want, whether it's something that we're eating in terms of food or that we're smoking like cannabis. You want to know that the purity and the connection that you have to that product is the best it can be.
When you're chatting layman, do you always recommend somebody starting growing indoor versus outdoor? How easy is it for somebody to grow cannabis at home? I think some people, if they see a giant indoor system with all these lights and fans, they might get a little intimidated and not think they could do it themselves. As, again, a master cultivator and somebody who teaches people how to grow cannabis at home, what is your recommendation there for someone getting started?
Great question. So obviously it depends on your setup. Some people who are, living in the city, maybe they live in an apartment on the third floor someplace. Obviously growing outside is a little bit tricky. If you happen to have a situation where you have, a home and a backyard, throwing a plant in the ground once you're wherever you, depending on where you live, once that last freeze happens and you're in that nice growing season, for most of us, it's like Mother's Day is sort of that calendar day that everyone kind of points to as like, hey, time to put your plants in the ground. Let's go. Summer's here. Let's get a good cultivation going. Putting plants in the ground is always fun. You're going to get a much bigger plant. You could also use containers outdoors, but the biggest challenge with people growing outdoors for the first time is I don't think they realize how big those plants are going to get. Now, no matter how much pruning and topping you do to try to contain, excuse me, to try to contain that plant, it's still going to be tricky. Indoor cultivation is just more controlled, and you're going to end up with a smaller, more manageable plant. Now, currently, what I'm doing as a way to really, connect with this, I made mention earlier about growing in my closet back in college days, which is always, a fun way to do it is just to find a small little cabinet or a closet that you can do indoors. But what we're doing right now is we're running a 4x8 Gorilla Grow Tent Challenge, where we're taking all of our commercial knowledge and we're just cramming it into a 4x8 Gorilla Grow Tent. and we've got two autos going from James Loud in there, and we've got two of our feminized plants going in there. And I gotta say that I am wildly impressed with how simple that Gorilla Grow tent setup is and how effective it has been. We are, shoot, where are we? We're in week 8, I want to say, somewhere 8, 9. So the autos are cranking in full bloom. It's taken a while for our fems to get going because we started them from seed. So those are just flipped at this point. But for somebody growing at home, if you've got a garage, Gorilla has these grow cabinets and they have grow tents, and they range in size. Obviously, you've got some small cabinets and some larger tents. But my goodness, what an easy system that has been for us to really connect with the home grower, to feel what that's like to be limited, where you can't control the environment the way that we can control our indoor rooms with all of our HVAC and dehumidifiers and all that good stuff. So cannabis is very forgiving as a plant to cultivate. And so if you've never done it before, there's certainly nothing to be intimidated about. But that's why that's why I wanted to, do the Mother Magnolia cultivation platform, and to give people an opportunity to learn about cultivation through the lens of commercial cultivation, and then take that knowledge and apply it to something as modest as a grow tent, or a small cabinet, or an extra small room that you have in your house. Whatever the case may be, there is a very, very straightforward path to getting a cultivation practice going at home. It doesn't mean there aren't, banana peels that you can slip on, but that's why we have our school community to give you guys that support, where you can just post pictures of your grow, and we're there to help and support.
Super rad. What was walk me through the first time you smoked or enjoyed cannabis. Were you a teenage user? Did it unlock, as an older adult? Walk me through your ritual with cannabis, and how
Yeah,
you used it.
for sure. So high school was when I first discovered cannabis, and I was a competitive tennis player in high school, pretty hardcore athlete. And I want to say it was probably closing in on my junior year when I really kind of leaned into it. And one of the other things that I sort of fell in love with when I was in high school was surfing. Not surfing on a surfboard, but boogie board surfing and body surfing. And so, as I said, I grew up in Santa Barbara for my high school years, and one of my best buddies was just a passionate boogie boarder. And with buggy boarding, it's super easy to, immediately get that taste of getting in a barrel and having that experience. He happened to be a big cannabis user, and so a boogie boarding session after a good session was sort of like this perfect 1-2 punch. And then you hit the tasty freeze afterwards to go ahead and top off the calories. It was kind of perfect. I just remember having just some religious moments out in the ocean, just feeling elevated. I always describe cannabis as this perfect way to turn off one valve and then to open another one. The valve of the daily grind, where you're working, managing all of the day-to-day activities of life. That's one aspect of our brain power that is super important. Got to do it. It's a necessary day-to-day experience. I don't use cannabis during the day ever. Not possible for me to run everything that I run and do everything I do while using cannabis. And it's not even necessarily about that. It's that when I do use it, I want to just be able to fully turn off the daily brain and unlock the creative brain. So I started songwriting as a freshman in college, and I found that using cannabis to unlock creativity was just absolutely like water. It was just so perfect. And I, again, after years and years and years of songwriting and recording and making albums, cannabis was just a natural part of that. And so it's been sort of in my system for quite a long time. I went through a phase where I stopped using it, and now my cannabis use is always in the evening. If I'm going to use it, it's going to be at night. And I just find that it does, the beauty of cannabis is that you can do sort of a level 1, level 2, level 3 high, where you can choose to just have a little click, you can have a moderate click, or you can go full on if you want to. And there's a lot of different ways to engage with it, and I find that it's part of why I have actually been increasingly turned on to the microdosing of mushrooms. A buddy of mine makes capsules, and I love the fact that I could take one capsule or two capsules or three capsules. And it's just a great way of dosing. And I think that with cannabis these days, with edibles and gummies, there's just so many easy ways and so many different delivery systems that people can use. I know that there's now patches. I've never done a transdermal patch, but my goodness, there's just so many different ways to um, utilize a phenomenal medicine like cannabis to unlock different aspects of your brain and of your day-to-day mindset. For me, it's an evening reality, and I don't know of a more sustainable psychoactive compound where all those endocannabinoid receptors in my brain are literally waiting for those cannabinoids to hit. How insane is that our brain is pre-wired with endocannabinoid receptors, and that there's this plant, and when you stop and think about the amount of energy that this plant has unlocked in terms of human ingenuity and the amount of activation energy that it's a plant. It's not like something that we're actually like, having a conversation with. Although I do say that cultivation is learning the language of plants, because when I'm communicating with plants with photons, nutrients, and room environment, that is a language. We are talking, and the plants get to just cheer, with joy that what we're doing is ultimately exactly what they want, and they also get pissed when somehow we get the language, we're not speaking their language properly, and they get pissed. But that is absolutely a language.
Beautifully
I'm
put.
sorry. I think I answered your question. I got lost on that one, but
As somebody so hands-on with flower, do you prefer to roll joints? Do you have a fancy bong that you've purchased from a glass artist? What is your preferred intake method?
yeah, good question. So I don't smoke a lot anymore. If I am gonna smoke, it's mostly with a joint. My preferred dosing methodology is with gummies because you can control it, and I do like the fact, and this is me being an old geezer and somebody who still needs good rest, recovery. I'm still training hard at my age. And so I prefer to just be able to dose things a little bit more carefully that way. But in terms of just flower, it's more taking it through that lens of wanting to get just that flavor, to get that taste, not necessarily using flower as a way to get high.
Beautifully put. Something, you mentioned microdosing mushrooms. Cannabis kind of gets left out of the psychedelic conversation. Is cannabis psychedelic to you? Why do you think it gets put in this separate plant medicine category as opposed to the mushrooms and ayahuasca and some of the more quote psychedelic plant medicines we're exploring these days?
Interesting question. So I have a couple thoughts about that. First, I think that my experience with psychedelics has been, probably in a similar realm to what most other people have experienced with psychedelics when you truly have a big trip. And that is that it's an investment. We're at 5, 6, 7 hours. I mean, it's a journey, and you're going deep, and it's a very, very altered state. If you're having a pretty heroic psychedelic experience, I don't think you can really get there with. I've never certainly gotten there with cannabis. That doesn't mean that cannabis doesn't have some psychedelic components or aspects to it. Of course, I think that it's more scope and scale that would sort of keep it out of that deeper conversation. But here's an example. Like we're running a strain on the farm right now called that was affectionately called Zamel delica. This is a Zamel landrace cross that was bred by Ace Seeds. And Zamel as a strain is really renowned for having some sort of heavier psychedelic qualities to it. And this particular strain, the reviews that we're getting from the market on this strain is hilarious. People are having some really wild experiences with this strain. And we sort of like took the A Seeds commentary at sort of face value, but Turns out that actually there may be some truth to that. And I think that there are certain strains that are more psychedelic than others. And as I said earlier, I think that it can also be a dosing experience. I mean, if you smash 100 milligrams of gummies in one sitting, I can tell you that you're probably going to, be uncomfortably, getting over the Rockies of that trip before you get to that calmer plateau of like, okay, we're going to be okay. It's fine. Um, so, I think cannabis has that potential. I just think that it maybe hasn't entered that conversation as deeply, simply because traditionally or typically you're not tapping that the depth of that kind of psychoactive experience.
With a lot of states coming online for legalization, the conversation and laws around growing at home has definitely fallen by the wayside. And states like New
Yeah.
Jersey here, don't even allow you to kind of grow cannabis plants at home. So how do we, as consumers, fight the good fight and make sure we have access to, again, something that's as easy as grow as tomatoes in your backyard and should be treated as such?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that, there's a handful of states that are still on the sidelines where there's just no legal means as a homeowner to cultivate plants. Fortunately, they're the exception. By my last count, there's only 5 or 6 remaining states where there isn't some program that would allow you to cultivate a few plants at home, whether it's a medical program, a rec program, or simply like here in Oregon, you can just have 4 plants that you can cultivate at home, no questions asked, no issues whatsoever. And so I think that a lot of it just I mean I guess there's 2 things. I think one is that it's just a matter of time before all this. I mean, as I said, we're just down to a handful of states. Are those states eventually going to come online? Probably. Is it going to take some Herculean effort where you're calling your senators or your representatives and demanding that you be allowed to cultivate legally at home just to have your own personal grow? It might take something like that, but I honestly feel like the amount of tidal energy that's already pushing forward through this movement is enough to get us there in the next couple of years, where every state will have some legal mechanism for the average homeowner to cultivate. I think that the main upshot of this is that either you need to be able to, as a consumer here, you need to be able to either go buy clean legal cannabis easily, just like I can go buy anything at the store, or you need to be given the mechanism where you can cultivate it yourself and provide that same medicine for yourself in whatever approach you want to take at home. End of conversation. Like that should just be the baseline for what we have access to here in 2025 in the United States of America. What the fuck are we even talking about? It just seems insane that we're even still having this conversation, but I think we're close to the finish line in terms of everybody having access to good, clean, either homegrown cannabis or cannabis that you can buy at a store.
How do we protect family farms and mid-sized cannabis cultivation operators? As we saw briefly in Oregon, the price of wholesale cannabis like crashed when everybody could start growing. How do we walk that fine line of protecting farmers but making sure the consumer has affordable options as well? And I'm somebody who does believe there is a market for the high-end cultivars that people will be searching for, and the hey, I'm just looking for the cheapest buds to get high at home.
Yeah, I mean, a difficult question that I really don't have a good answer to, honestly. I think that protecting craft cannabis farms is this. I mean, do we take a page from the sort of the microbrewery book, where you can continue to find really good high quality craft brewery, or examples of really good high quality craft brewery out there, even in an age where Budweiser and larger conglomerates are producing sort of just average beer. Maybe, I would love to believe that. We're not all just going to get swallowed up by some giant, Death Star of, big corporate cannabis, where it's going to be 2 or 3 producers that are all going to be distributing through, Amazon. I don't know what the future holds. I think that for the most part, farmers markets exist, small grocery stores exist, craft breweries exist. I think that the trend that appears to be crossing lots of different aspects of commerce is, as we go deeper into sort of this global climate crisis, as we go deeper into scarcity of resource management and the issue of resource management across multiple industries, it feels to me like humanity is skewing toward quality, purity, and sustainability. And we know that quality, purity, and sustainability from an agricultural perspective is quantumly easier to achieve with smaller craft scale approaches to agriculture. Full stop. So, my hope is that the overall demands from consumers for quality, consistency, and that purity of product will ultimately win the day long term, and that there will be a market for, farms like us and all the others that are out there, not just even in the cannabis ecosystem, but it's why we go to the farmers market every single week, and we pay a little bit more for that produce, but what we're paying into is supporting local farms. And I think that's really the trend that we need to sort of focus on and amplify, is just supporting local small farms.
Beautifully put. You mentioned earlier your mushroom microdosing regimen. How did you get into building psilocybin and mushrooms into your health regimen, and what is your mushroom experience like?
Yeah, it actually just started with, again, something as simple as, in my case, a buddy of mine was really into it and happened to have a really good source in his area, and he was doing some nice combinations of psilocybin with, just like, I think, some lion's mane, turkey tail, agarikon, and a couple other different cool medicinal mushrooms that have no psychoactive compounds. I've been a national treasure of ours is Paul Stamets. So Paul Stamets is a mycologist that's based up in Washington, and his whole line of, I think, fungi perfecti is his company, and his flagship SKU is called Myco Immunity, or My Community. So Myco Immunity is a product that I've been taking for about 15 years now. It's got 17 different mushrooms blended in it. I am a staunch believer that mushrooms are one of the closest things we have to sort of like alien life force on our planet, that is all invisible and unseen, and yet the mycelium web that basically stretches from here to Timbuktu is running the fucking show here. Microbes, right? Fungi and bacteria run this fucking planet. And I believe that the healing properties of mushrooms is, I think we've just begun to scratch the surface of that. So as a daily tonic for 15 years, I've been taking mycoimmunity, and knock on wood, not jinxing it, just stating facts. I think that in the last 15 years, I've maybe been sick, like sick once. I don't get sick. Is it a combination of cannabis and mushrooms? Sure, let's say that. I also happen to be a huge fan of raw milk, and there's a farm that's about 10 minutes down the road from us here in Oregon that they deliver my raw milk to me weekly. I'm a big believer in whole, local, seasonal food as the backbone to any good health regimen. Mushrooms, though, are a core part of it. And then microdosing, getting a little bit of that tiny psychoactive compound baked into it. As I said, my buddy started making these blends. If I didn't have a friend who was like, hey, I'm doing these cool little mushroom caps, you want me to bring you some? I may not have necessarily sought it out or tried to find some sourcing for that. It just happened to be a gift that I was like, hell yeah, let's give that a shot. And as of course the name suggests, microdosing, it allows you to get just the way that I think of it is that it just adds a little bit of a shine, a little bit of a color and a feeling to a situation that is not, crazy psychoactive. It just adds a lift, a buoyancy to the moment that I find it pleasant. It's great.
Food is definitely medicine, and as a master cultivator, have you now tried growing mushrooms at home or at scale, and what are some of the varietals you see popular around you?
Great. I have not, to be honest. I have not tried cultivating mushrooms yet. Yet. I think it's something that I would love to do. I think it would be fun. I think it would be absolutely magical, and it's on the to do list. It just is something that I haven't made a priority yet.
What are your recommendations again for food as medicine, and how can somebody get in tune with the local, with seasonal, and how to look out for the right stuff to be putting in their body?
Sure. I do feel like I have not lived in every state of the union. I've lived in Europe. I've traveled pretty widely, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to bet $100 that wherever you live, there's a farmer's market nearby once a week that you could tune into. Not necessarily all year round, although here in Oregon, our winters are not gnarly, but they're wet, and the farmers markets they bring them indoors. There's all kinds of options for finding local seasonal food, but to me, that is the way that we should be thinking about our food, is that you want to find local seasonal options. If most of what ends up in your body on a daily basis is whole, local, seasonal food, it's almost impossible to go wrong with your wellness program. I think that adding in some supplements, sure, why not? I do it, and I have religiously for the better part of 2 decades. But what I do think I do think that the verdict is in. I don't think it's complicated. I don't think that it's anything that is out of reach for anyone, aside from the fact that it is undeniable that when you go to farmers markets, you're going to spend more than if you walked into an Albertsons or a Safeway to buy that same produce. It's true, but the freshness, the quality, and the overall nutrient density of that food from local farms is simply going to be superior. And as I said earlier, you're supporting local farms. What else would you want to do with your money than ensure that local farms have a sustainable model to continue to produce great quality food for you, your family, your community, and everyone that you live around? We all want to be healthier. We all want to feel good. And I think that it all starts with tapping into local seasonal food. If you can't grow it yourself, clearly having your own little vegetable garden is a great antidote as well. But if you aren't able to do that, finding a local source is the way forward.
Beautifully put. An important note there is the importance of local soil, and not only if you're going a soil route, whether you're growing cannabis outdoors. Could you talk about like the perfect type of soil for growing cannabis? People talk a lot about worm casings and some of the other stuff they might want to look for when choosing the right grow medium.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, soil is everything. And we've been curating our soil here on the farm for years. What it means to be curating soil for years is that we repurpose our soil, reuse it over and over and over and over again, re-amending and reintegrating different inputs to continue to build that soil and to continue to revitalize that soil. Soil is it's a living thing. And what's living in that soil, of course, are all the microbes, the billions and trillions of microbes that are in there, the bacteria, the fungi, all the microbiology in that soil that is unlocking those nutrients and making them bioavailable to the plants. So you're ultimately not feeding your plants, you're feeding the soil, meaning you're feeding all the biology that's in that soil. And the biology then is having that communication with the plants. The beauty and the magic of soil and the relationship between plants and soil is that plants, through their root systems, they exude these root exudates, mostly in the form of sugars, carbohydrates. So the plant will signal to the biology in the soil through actual root exudates that they will send out into the immediate area around where they are. The biology gets that message on a biochemical level and says, oh, gotcha, you needed some nitrogen. Cool, here you go. You need this, you need that. It's a dialogue that the biology and the plants are having. When you start thinking about soil through the lens of a dialogue that's happening between the plant and the biology in that soil, it changes the way that you think about that soil. Now, the only way that you know whether or not your soil is a balanced and vibrant ecosystem for that plant to thrive in is by actually testing your soil and understanding what's in your soil. So we send out soil samples every couple of weeks, and we're constantly checking both input soil, meaning fresh soil that's about to get loaded into a room. We're also testing spent soil, soil that is at the end of a cycle, to understand what bank accounts were drawn down, how much calcium was depleted, how much phosphorus was depleted. Now, for the average homeowner, the idea of like tracking phosphorus and calcium and all these different inputs, probably not going to happen, not necessarily realistic. Though, also, a real world example of this would be if Bob or Ted or Susie homeowner had a vegetable garden that they were working on every season, and then in the winter, let's just say it goes dormant. It's, there's 2 feet of snow on the ground, and the veggie garden. It's now April, May, and we're waking up that soil for the season. Taking a soil sample for $65, throw it in a Ziploc bag, take it over to the post office, and for a nickel 97, you ship that off to Logan Labs in Ohio. That's the soil analysis company we've been working with for years and years and years, and it's $65 to get a soil sample analyzed. You get your saturated paste and your soil report. Now, $65 it's not $6.50, but it's also not $650. And to know what's in your soil, about a week to 2 weeks later, 10 days, you'll get your soil report back. And so going into your growing season, you're able to see, oh shit, calcium's low. For an extra couple of bucks, Logan will do an actual, you can get an agronomist on the horn to talk you through your soil report. If you don't have enough experience to do that, but I swear to God, with AI these days, I almost feel like we're just in fact, we may already be there, and I'm just unaware of that, where you could literally just upload your soil report into like Chat GPT and say, give me my recommendations for what I need to add to this soil. Like, anyway, I think that the main takeaway, Kyle, that I would say is soil is everything, and having a balanced soil is ultimately what is the key to successful cultivating, whether it's cannabis or tomatoes, it doesn't matter. Everything that that plant needs and that the biology needs in order to unlock and make that available to the plants is that's really the beginning and the end of the conversation. Soil science and studying soil is a deep, deep rabbit hole to go down, and by no means am I don't want to oversimplify it, but I also want to say that most high quality bagged soils that you can just get at your local nursery or your local Home Depot are not that far away from being a reasonable substrate to begin with for the average grower at home. There's clearly some things that, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but there's clearly some things that you can do to improve that soil. A couple of dry amendments that for us are absolutely essential to what we do here. They're not expensive. They're very straightforward, and it's part of what we cover in our cultivation course. It's part of what's in our modules, our fertility module, our biology module. All of those things are what we go into in order to explain how we think about soil here on our farm, and of course at scale, when we're talking about hundreds of yards of soil that we go through every year. It doesn't matter. It could be a yard of soil for you at home, but it's all the same principles apply. And so that's why we make such a big deal about soil and soil biology, because if you get that right, you then take a target that, in hydro terms might be the size of a quarter, and in soil terms that opens up your target to something that's the size of a football field. It becomes much easier to cultivate well, and you've got just much more of a buffer built into soil cultivation.
Have you ever experienced this? If somebody is growing cannabis outdoors, are there any good companion plants that go along with growing cannabis outside?
Yeah. So typically, the big thing about companion planting is it's twofold. Again, it's continuing to create microbial diversity, because the microbes that are drawn to clover and alfalfa and some of the other top dressed plants that people will put in living beds, that those ultimately generate a different microbial ecosystem down below. So that's first. The second thing people look at is sort of this nitrogen fixing that you're going to get in certain clover, red clover crops, things like that. That ultimately, once those crops are essentially done and spent, and you till those back into the soil, you're getting not only the carbon, of course, going back in there, and but you're getting all kinds of the benefits like nitrogen that's getting re-amended into the soil. So it's just a cheap and cool way to toss some seeds on top of a row, a bed, a pot, a large, 100-gallon container if you're growing in containers. and you just get a nice seed crop growing on top of companion plantings that helps to diversify that ecosystem.
Well put. Tom, you've got a wealth of knowledge. Where can people follow you, take your course, learn more, and taste your buds?
Perfect. So if you live in Oregon, you can taste our flower. Unfortunately, we're still stuck in the metric system where it's a closed loop system, and as all states that have legal systems are. So if you live in Oregon, you can find us all over the state. We're literally stem to stern all over the state. Easiest place to find us are at Nectar locations. They get all of our pre-rolls, they get all of our flower, and there are 45 Nectar locations. So pretty easy to find us at a Nectar location. Um, in terms of any of our socials and content, of course, we're on YouTube under Mother Magnolia Cultivation. That's where we've got our YouTube channel. We've got our Instagram, Mother Magnolia Media, and our cultivation course, mothermagnoliacultivation.com. So we have launched that course. It's 14 modules, over 3 hours of content with all this information that we've been covering here, and then some. And then along with that cultivation course, the 14 modules, you get our school community. That's the SKOOL. If you're not familiar with school, it's basically like Facebook groups, but better. And it allows you to, if you sign up for the course, it gives you an opportunity to post pictures of your cultivation and ask myself and my team questions about, hey, what about this deficiency? What should I be thinking about here? Do I need to start topping my plant? Should I prune it? Should I defoliate? A lot of the questions that come up that are just completely normal, basic blocking and tackling of cultivation, that if you haven't done it before, it can be a little bit, intimidating. But as soon as like somebody like myself or my team gives you the thumbs up, like, yeah, go ahead and, take 20% of those leaves off, or go ahead and, prune this, do this, add this input. It just gives you the confidence to lean in and give it a shot. And that's why we're excited about it. It's something that we're just launching it this summer. Of course, as you know, Kyle, you've been, had a front row seat for all the time that it's taken us to kind of get ready to get our spikes on the chalk, ready to run this race. We're excited to let people know that it's there. We're excited to have people join the community and build this community. I think it's going to be cool.
Excellent, Tom. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks for having me on today, Kyle. We'll do it again sometime, but really appreciate your time, and thanks for having me.